Morning, Venerable. Good morning. Good morning, friends. Today I'm going to continue. This is my third talk about the linkage between the early Buddhist teaching and Mahayana Buddhism. One point I would like to stress is Mahayana Buddhism is not a different or separate set of Buddhist teaching. It is a teaching that emphasizes the development of loving kindness and compassion. So don't mistaken that it is a separate set. It is something different from the original or early teaching of the Buddha. So I would like to continue. I think we went through, what are the three baskets, the discourses, or what we call the concept or teaching of the Buddha. Then the Buddha set a set of moral discipline for his disciple to follow. So that is Vinaya. And also, after the teaching of the Buddha, some of the disciples or followers or listeners, they don't understand. So either the Buddha explained it again, or his disciple or practitioners make a comment, try to explain, try to interpret the teaching of the Buddha. So the three baskets, it's the sutta or sutra, the Vinaya, and also the sastra or the commentary. They have different functions, emphasis. So I think, we went through that, just a little bit of revision, that the sutta or sutra comes first before the commentaries. The sutta or sutra are discourses of the Buddha himself, answering questions based on or according to the need, or what we call the faculties of each practitioner. And then the commentary is actually after listening to the discourses. It's, disciples or practitioners arrange, select, connect, using the simile or metaphor, and then they account the previous life or current life of the Buddha. Then it explains the causality, what are the causes, what are the consequences, with explanation. So that, if we want to make a difference between the sutta or the sastra, one is, a direct discourse teaching from the Buddha based on the need of that practitioner. The other one is after the discourse, people are trying to explain, trying to arrange in a sense that for followers to understand. So, and the Vijnana is different. At the Buddha's time, to begin with, there is no rules or what we call the Vijnana being set. Then when the Buddha saw the need to have this discipline applied to the community, then he started to make some moral disciplines. So that's the difference between the two. And we went over to how Theravada or Mahayana Buddhism spread throughout mainly Asia. or Middle Asia at the time. So more as like the Theravada Buddhism or the early teaching of the Buddha kind of traveled directly from India down south to Sri Lanka and now widely practiced in the Southeast Asia, like countries like Bangkok, like Myanmar, Vietnam, so forth. And then the Mahayana teaching or emphasis kind of travel north through Middle Asia to China. Or some of them would travel the seaway, down through like Malaysia, all the way down, and then travel back north to China. Now, Mahayana Buddhism, it's already exists or being practiced or being spread in India. It's not something that developed or shouldn't use the word arises all of a sudden appeared in China. That's not the case. It is already developed or being practiced in India. So, and then we have evidence showing that. So after the Buddha entered the Parinirvana, a group of elders led by Mahakassapa called for an assembly. There were 500 arahants, meaning people, they are already cut off all the fetters. So they gathered together and tried to preserve the Buddha's teaching. With Mahananda, his attendant, the Buddha's attendant, recited all the discourses by the Buddha because he was the attendant of the Buddha, followed him up and down the Ganges River for 40-some years. Then with Upali, who is very rigid in observing all the vijnana, the precepts, recited the vijnana, the discipline. And then this is controversial for the sastra or for the commentary. It was said that it was recited by Anuruddha, but there are different sayings about this. So this is what we call the early Buddhist teaching or school of thought. Then the entire teaching, entire Tripitaka, passed down from India all the way to Sri Lanka and preserved in a vast, collection. It's called the Pali Canon, and it's still there. We're still learning about that. People are still translating from the original Pali language into various languages, including English. So, Pali Canon is what we commonly referred as the early Buddhist teaching in a very complete collection. Then remember we said that, the teaching travels south to Sri Lanka, travel north to China. Then there is another set of the early teaching of the Buddha. It is translated from Sanskrit into Chinese language, and we give it a title called the Agama. So Nikaya, it's in the south, collected in the Polycanon. Agama traveled north into China. They are very similar, but there are some teachings or discourses that appear in the Agama but not collected in the Nikaya, and vice versa. But if we are going to mention about, these collections, we have 5 Nikayas. The most important, what we call the mother of the discourse, is called the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourse, or the Zha'ahan in the Agama side. Then we have the Diga, which what we call the long discourses. And then we have the Majjhima, the medium size. And then we have the Anguttara, this is a little bit different translation. Direct translation is called one up. 1, 2, 3, 1 up. Okay, it's a numerical discourses. So similar with the Agama, there is only a little bit of difference, not much. It's called the minor Agama or Kundaka Nikaya. So why do I emphasize that? It's because if we want to connect Theravada or the early teaching of the Buddha with Mahayana, this Kundaka Nikaya plays a very important role. Okay, like I said, this is a pretty interesting chart that separate that tells about the lineage of the two. This time I use the word sect because it's a sectarian beginning of the schism in the Sangha community. One group with the elders, the other group with majority but younger practitioners or monastic or the Sangha community. So they each have their own emphasis, and then all the way down to this red little box called the Theravada Buddhism. And then, of course, the Mahasanghikas, which are the majority, then they have their own lineage down there. So this is the council I just, listed so that, we have a little sense of what's happening. So 3 months after the Buddha entered the Parinibbana, then it was the first assembly called by Mahakassapa. Then about 100 years later, the schism actually begins here in the second assembly. It split it into different groups, okay? Then at the time of King Asoka, it comes the third assembly. At this time, not just the elder group and the common younger group, but also within the elder group, kind of split into 2 groups again. And very important one and very influential one is the Sarasivadians. They have their own ideas about 3 things. Emptiness. They have their own idea of that. They have their own idea of the so-called self. Okay, and they come up with a very powerful, very useful technique called the Abhidhamma. The way to analyze what's happening mentally. Very detailed. It's a very powerful tool. Later on, by Vasubandhu, he followed this technique, but he also come up with different or opposition of this idea of the self. So, sorry, I can't go into detail of that because, this is not part of the subject for this talk. Then the fourth assembly was held in Sri Lanka, then the fifth one, and then the sixth one. So those are the Buddha's council. Now, my previous talk, I emphasized that there are 4 charts or 4 diagrams that explains the linkage or lineage between the Theravada and also the Mahayana. So I kind of, extract or take the chart from a book called The Essence of Agama by teacher Yang Yuwen. It's in the Chinese language. I, do my best to do a little bit of the translation, those are actually in Chinese language. So kind of separate into 3 streams. You can see the 3 colors, the Vijnana Pitaka, or the basket of Vijnana, moral discipline, the sutra in the middle with the red color, and then the mantra. So again, this is not a separate set of the Buddha's teaching. It's just like the different way of perception or explanation of the Buddha's teaching. So the discourse, the sutta discourse, which we consider, very important, or if not most important, because without understanding that, we can't practice. Okay, so it started with when Ananda recited, started with the Samyutta Nikaya, which we consider the mother of all these discourses. So if it comes in a verses form, developed it into the Digha, long Nikaya, or discourse. If it is in a journal form, and then it developed it in the Majjhima, middle length. Now this journal form can be separated whether it's a journal form by the Buddha or a journal form by the disciple. If it's by the disciple, then kind of goes to the Majjhima Nikaya. If the journal form is by the Buddha, then we call it the numerical Nikaya or the Anguttara Nikaya. And then the mantra actually developed it from the Digha Nikaya. So you might want to ask, why do I need to know all these? I just want to practice and get out of trouble. It's a very good question. If you have that question in mind, why do I need to know all these? So I think I talked about that before. No, you don't need to know. Then why am I sitting here and trying to explain? In practice, if we decided to practice the teaching of the Buddha, then ask ourselves, why do I want to practice the teaching of the Buddha? It's because we understand suffering is the fact. We want to find out the cause, why we suffer, or dissatisfied with or about what we are now, what we have. Want to find out the cause, right? Then we want to practice so that we can end all these dissatisfaction or suffering. Then eventually we'll reach the status or the point that all the suffering cease to exist. Now, if that is the purpose, then the Buddha said, I walk the path, I practice, I understand what's going on, so just follow. I'm a teacher, just follow my path, then you get out from this ocean of suffering to the other shore of liberation. There are 3 goals that people can choose. One, just get out of the suffering, get yourself in a more desirable environment so that we can continue to practice. Now, this more desirable environment is coming back as a human being so that we can practice. Or we go to a better, more comfortable, not necessarily good for practice, what we call the heaven or celestial beings. If that's our goal, we don't need to know all these lineage or not lineage, Nikaya or Agama. Okay, we just practice generosity, follow the Eightfold Path. We just practice the moral discipline, become a good person. That'll be good enough, right? So at least preserve the human body or celestial being body. But if we want to choose the path of liberation, what we call the path of liberation, we need to practice the 37 prerequisites of enlightenment. And it's in the Agama, it's in the Nikaya. Okay? But if we want to go the Bodhisattva route, this is necessary. We need to know all the teaching of the Buddha. Because liberation of this person is not important. It is important, but not as much important compared to the other route. Because we want to help others. And we don't know who am I going to share the knowledge, share the teaching according to their faculties. So we need to learn all the 84,000 discourses of the Buddha. So we need to know where these teachings coming from, how they developed into Theravada, Mahayana, Tantric. We need to know all because we are trying to help people out of their suffering. Make sense? Does that make sense? So do we need to know or not? I would say we have all the Bodhisattvas. So let's learn together. So this is chart number 1. Number 2 is going to tell us, especially in, what did I do? especially the middle part of it, because this is the core teaching. This is what we need to pay attention. This is the explanation. This is actually the direct teaching. Okay, so whether it's Samyutta, Majjhima, Digha, Anguttara, Kundika, they are all important. They're all important. So why do I mention Kundika? Is one of the important collection that we need to pay attention when we look at the development. All these small things here actually were collected eventually into this Kundika Pitaka, including the Dhammapada. And because of all these different teachings, then it got expanded, developed it into two groups. And here, when we look down here, the Vapuya Sutra actually come down to a compilation of the Bodhisattva canon. Okay, also with the Kundika, when we read the Mahayana Sutra, you can find the description of the previous life of the Buddha, explanation of the connection. It tells how the Buddha in his previous life as a Bodhisattva, how he practiced and savaged other beings. So it's actually the beginning of the Bodhisattva practice. Here, it's still in India. Okay, that is still in India. So then later on, the sutra or sutta kind of developed it with the commentary going on. Then the compilation of the early or origin Mahayana Buddhist scripture. So that is why I said, don't forget the importance of the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourse, because all these had their foundation or basis from the Samyutta Nikaya. Okay, it's very interesting. So the next one with the Kundika, with the compilation of the Bodhisattva canon. So the early or original Mahayana Buddhist scriptures started, and then the first stage of the Mahayana Sutra is actually at here. So when we look at Prajnaparamita, when we look at Heart Sutra, Diamond Sutra, the entire volume of the Prajnaparamita Sutra sprout from there. Okay, and then emerge. There are different schools emerge at the time, like the Sutra of the Manjushri, the Avatansaka Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, all sprout from there. Originated from these two groups, remember? Kundika, and then this, what we call Vapuya. It's all developed from there. So, from the Sastra area, it also developed it, from the Abhidhamma Pitaka all the way down. Then the Abhidhamma, let's see, what is it? Mahavivara, and then all the way down till Vasubandhu's time, Abhidhamma Kosa. Okay, so this is a very important developmental chart. Okay. Then, when time goes by, people making comments, practice, practice with comment. After, following based on the teaching of Samyutta Nikaya, all those 4 Nikayas, then all the way down, and Master Venerable Insun nailed down to 3 schools that are the key teachings nowadays. We can kind of categorize into 3 groups. One is called the School of Yogacara, the School of Madhyamaka, and the School of Tathagata. Okay, but all these, what we consider as the Mahayana teaching, it's from India. Very interesting. To me, it's very interesting. To you, maybe a little bit more. But as a bodhisattva, let's learn. Any question? I have like about 2 minutes.
I have a question about the spread of Buddhism. So there was a map.
I'm sorry?
I have a question about the spread of Buddhism around the world. So there was a map which says that to Tibet it came through China, right?
The map?
Yeah.
Okay. Go back a little bit. You're talking about this map?
Yeah. If you can make it bigger, like you can see that to Tibet it came from China, right?
Right.
And there was no direct linkage to, because it's very close.
Very good question. Between Nepal, because Buddha was actually born in Nepal, at that time, it belonged to India. So, if I remember correctly, in a very small kingdom called Kapilavatthu. So he was born there, teaching, walking up and down the Ganges River for 45 years. Now, when Buddhism start to remember the first council, Buddhism start to go, directions. Then at the time, India or North India and China, there's one thing. It's an obstacle.
Yeah, but it's not an impassable obstacle. I mean, people go through those mountain passes all the time.
Right. But at the time, we can't travel by airplane or car. So the obstacle there is called the Himalayas. So we cannot, the teaching cannot go directly into China through the Himalayas at the time. So they wear the Middle Asia, like Kashmir, like Afghanistan, then and take a route and then go into China. Now, with that traveling, actually, a lot of traditions was picked up. So if we want to call, is it really purely without any addition or subtraction of the Buddha's teaching? Scholars always have a question mark there. Because a lot of the Mahayana practitioner or practice or teaching went through the circle and come down to China. Or even at sea, it's not directly. So we cannot say that by some, well, I guess we can say that, it's the Buddha's teaching, no doubt about that. But, did it pick up something? Even in China, in China itself. Buddhism first came to China in the Han Dynasty, early Han Dynasty. At the time, not Confucianism, but Taoism was, the major belief in China at the time. So Buddha's teaching cannot survive without adapting the terms of the Taoism. And then until Kumarajiva and Sun Zhao, they kind of strain out and want to separate. No. This is Taoism. This is Taoism teaching. This is the Buddha's teaching, especially about the prajna teaching. So similar in terminology, but the concept is totally different. So if we're saying that the traveling without picking up, then we have to think about it. So that is why, Pali Canon is considered the direct or more original teaching of the Buddha. Yes, it actually traveled from different route. So like from Kashmir, Middle Asia, they pick up like, for example, worshiping of various god or goddess. Those are something they pick up in a way. But if we see the Mahayana Sutra, it talked about, various bodhisattvas, goddess, god, it's a little bit, picking up from here and there. For the Pali Canon, there is only one bodhisattva. It's Shakyamuni Buddha before he became the Buddha, right? So there are some traditions and various tradition, religion being included. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All we need to know is the 3 seals. Anything that in accordance to the 3 seals, then we're safe. What are the 3? Dukkha, anicca, anatta, and then add into the Mahayana, nirvana. Anything fall into that scope, teaching about that scope was safe. We have no worry about it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, partially.
Partially.
And one more question, like there is one more arrow through Laos. So there was like from Bodh Gaya to Laos and after that to China. So Buddhism also came to China through Laos.
Yeah. But when after the Buddha become enlightened in Bodh Gaya, right?
Yes.
Then his teaching at his time, the teaching it's within India. But then it's after the first assembly, especially after the third assembly, at the time of King Asoka, Buddhism started to travel. Okay, but it's not necessary that, that is why I said Agama and Nikaya. If we consider Nikaya, the Pali Canon, the Pali collection is the early or original teaching of the Buddha. Agama actually traveled into China. So we didn't lose anything at all. It's just the emphasis in the certain location or certain area. It's just like here in the United States. A lot of the practitioners follow or practice the meditation. And also they emphasize very much so in the Pali Canon. Look at the translation into English. If you're interested, just feel free to ask a copy of this. Hopefully that will help. Thank you. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be healthy. And may all beings be liberated. Thank you all.